It is Star Wars month, and I hope everybody has been enjoying it in whatever ways that you do, whether watching the movies, watching favorite scenes, or catching up on new content, or whatever. But I think it would be a fun idea for this month that I go over my top 10 favorite Star Wars characters. Star Wars has always been a big part of my life. I've always really enjoyed it since I was like a little kid, and Star Wars has a great variety of characters, from the movies to the shows, from even the books and stuff. So many different type of characters, and I just wanted to go over my 10 favorites. Now, before we get into the list proper, just remember that these are all my opinions, and if you disagree with anything I have to say, or you just want to talk about some of the characters that I decide to talk about, or even the characters that you want to, let me know in the comments below. I always want to hear your guys' opinions and just like your ideas on stuff. So go ahead and list your top 10 in the comments below, and I'd love to see everybody's opinions on that. Now, one other thing is, before we get into the list, because there are so many characters in this series, I can't talk about just 10. So very quickly, I wanted to rapid fire off a couple of honorable mentions that I have, just because, again, there are so many characters that I love, and narrowing it down to 10 is very, very hard. So, very quickly, for honorable mentions, the original crew from the original trilogy, so Han, Leia, Chewie, R2, and 3PO. All of them are iconic, all of them are beloved, and all of them are amazing in their own ways. Han is the original smartass, very charismatic, very good in a fight, just really fun guy to watch. Leia, she's not your typical damsel in distress. She's she has her badass moments. She doesn't put up with any shit from Han or Luke, especially Han, or just BS as a general. Chewie, always fun to watch him bounce off of Han, and he has his moments to shine as well. R2, who doesn't love R2? Always hilarious, always cracks a smile. I always like seeing R2 do his own little things. And then C-3PO is kind of hit or miss. He's can be kind of an ass sometimes, but he also has his moments to shine. But yeah, so just the original crew from the original trilogy. Next we have Mando. I've really been enjoying The Mandalorian, even though I still have my, not issues, but I have my opinions on it about certain things. But overall, I really like The Mandalorian. I like seeing him develop into kind of this caretaker of Grogu, and seeing him develop more than just another badass bounty hunter, but still watching him take on a group of guys just single-handedly and prove how strong he is, and why he's come as far as he has, is always dope to see. Then we have Finn, specifically Finn from The Force Awakens, because unfortunately in The Last Jedi, and especially in The Rise of Skywalker, he kind of falls off. But Finn in The Force Awakens is a really fun character to watch. I really think that a defective stormtrooper turned good guy is a really cool concept. I wish that they did a lot more with it, because again, he kind of falls off after the first movie, but I think he's probably my favorite character in The Force Awakens, and I liked seeing his whole dynamic with Rey and Poe, and just him trying to hide who he is until it finally comes out, and he has to step up to the plate, and especially fighting Kylo Ren and stuff, while he doesn't last long. Just the fact that he did it, I like Finn. Finn's a fun character to watch in The Force Awakens. I just wish that they did a little bit more with him. They like didn't just drop him, essentially. Then we have Dooku. Dooku is weird because for the longest time I thought he just kind of comes out of nowhere in Attack of the Clones, and then he just dies at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. And so we never really like got an explanation for him, or like never really got to see him like develop, or like even like who he was as a person. But because of Clone Wars and also Tales of the Jedi, I think that was the spin-off little Clone Wars series that they made, but either way, where they delve deeper into Dooku, I find it really interesting that like he's not fully like evil. He's not like, he's a Sith, don't get me wrong, and he does some really like messed up things, and he's still very much a dark side user, but he became that way because not because he was evil, but because he basically just disagreed with how the Jedi were operating at that point, and just wanted to like stray away from it. And Palpatine, being the manipulator he is, saw that, took advantage of it, and offered him another solution. And so while Dooku is still evil, he's never, he's not a traditional Sith. He's not like, he has his darker moments, he has his evil moments, but I feel like he's not like truly enveloped in the dark side that some other characters are, like Vader, Maul, and Sidious. There's always like a hint of like, I don't want to say light, but maybe like, I don't know, he's just not fully enveloped in the dark side as other characters, and I think it's kind of interesting. And then finally, we have Qui-Gon Jinn, who left too soon. Don't really get to see a whole lot of Qui-Gon, but just, especially being the apprentice of Dooku, we can kind of see like his viewpoint. And I think it's really interesting that we have a Jedi who doesn't really follow the will of the Council fully. He's more like follows the will of the Force and does what he thinks is right for the galaxy and just for the betterment of everything. He's not truly like caught up in all the politics. He's not arrogant like some other Jedi are, especially the Council. He's the one that finds the Chosen One and recognizes Anakin's like status as the Chosen One like right away, while all the other Jedi are like, well, maybe like they aren't sure, like they aren't fully convinced that he is, especially for after like the little tests that they put him through. They're like, oh, he's too old, he has too much attachment, this, that, and the other thing. But Qui-Gon still is like, doesn't matter, he's still the Chosen One, he has a destiny to fulfill, he's very important, I will train him no matter what. And again, just seeing a Jedi like not caught up in their own arrogance, not caught up in the politics at the time, just a Jedi that wants to do good and do good by the will of the Force, and wants to do what is better for the galaxy, which ultimately all Jedi kind of do, but Qui-Gon's a different kind of case because he's not caught up in the politics and everything. So those are all the honorable mentions, and now we are going to get into the list proper. So, and again, leave your comments on who are your favorite characters and why, and if you disagree with some of my picks, I'd love to have a discussion. And just kind of as like a baseline for everybody, pretty much everybody that is on this list and that I've already mentioned are partly on here because I think they're a cool character and a badass to a certain degree in a fight. So I won't touch too much on that. I'll be mostly talking about like their characters or like their character arcs and like them, like their personality and stuff like that. But just to give a little bit of a flat line for everybody, everybody on here is on here for in some way, shape, or form because they're a badass in a fight. So, with all that being said, let's get into the list.
Show me again the power of the darkness, and I will let nothing stand in our way. Show me. Grandfather.
So at number 10, we have Kylo Ren. Now, Kylo Ren, I think most people can agree that was probably the best character in the sequels, or at least one of the most interesting. And I think that he has a really like interesting relationship with the Force. You know, most times we see people get seduced by the dark side and they stay on the dark side. There's not really like a whole lot of light like left in them. Like they just fully envelop into the dark side. Kylo Ren actually like he wants to be on the dark side. Like he fully like embraces the dark, but there's something pulling him back. It's more like the light is trying to re-seduce him back. And I think a lot of it has to do with his ties to obviously his parents, Han and Leia, and then also with Luke, you know, being trained, and then what happens and he goes to Snoke, but there's still something pulling him back. And his whole thing of, you know, let the past die, kill it, like it's his way of trying to destroy Ben Solo as a whole, because that's what's connecting him to the light and his previous connections to those other people. So he tries his best to get rid of it, cut every tie. He kills Han Solo in Force Awakens, and that is a very, very sad scene. One of my favorites, but it's a very emotional scene. He was originally going to kill Leia, but he hesitates, and that, I think, like it's him still, like it's his light peeking out, essentially. It's like, we killed our dad, he was kind of an asshole, but that's Mom, like, probably not. And then, you know, he wants to kill Luke, but that doesn't necessarily happen. I'm not the biggest fan of what happens to him in The Rise of Skywalker. I do like his little scene with Han. I think that's probably the best scene in the movie. But, like, him getting a redemption arc, like, I don't mind it. I wish they did it a little bit better, but still that scene with, like, Han, just them kind of mirroring what happens in The Force Awakens, and like this time I don't think I have the strength to do it line like takes on a different meaning, like him letting go of Kylo Ren instead of trying to cut all of his ties to Ben. But back to what I like about him, I think like in a way he has, like in The Last Jedi he talks about like kill the past, like let everything die, like, and like things have been like horrible for like the last like 40 years, like since like the Empire took over, like things have just been like really, really bad. And with him in charge, like he'll make sure that things are different, although I highly doubt that they would be. But his whole thing of we need to stop this like vicious cycle from that keeps happening, like no more Jedi, no more Sith, like no rebellion, no Empire, like he would try his best to essentially make sure that the wars would stop. But, I don't think that could ever truly happen. And I think, like, one of my biggest things that I like about him is that he's, like, he did what Vader couldn't. He is very, very easy to see as just a Vader parallel, obviously with the mask and just his overall, like, him being the apprentice. He literally talks to the helmet and is like, show me the dark side again, like, I will finish what you started, in reference to Vader. Like, he idolizes Vader, but he one-ups Vader. He does what Vader could never do. He killed his master and took over the the First Order. He became the Supreme Leader. Vader would have never been able to take care of Palpatine. Like, Palpatine would have always just killed Vader if there was any attempt to try and take him down. But Kylo actually one-ups Snoke. And in that kind of way, he, like, is superior to Vader because he didn't have, like, he was actually able to do it. Now, the way he does it is kind of weird. Like, how did Snoke not notice? But at the same time, he's sitting there, like, tempting Rey and talking. But I like that scene overall, but it's just nitpicking. But he does what Vader couldn't. And we see him, like, immediately then try to get Rey on his side and try to take out, like, the rebellion and basically try and cut all of his ties. But she sees light in him. She still sees Ben in Kylo. And so that's why I like Kylo Ren. Obviously, he's a badass and I like his fights and his lightsaber is really cool. But him being, like, a Vader parallel and then also, like, succeeding over Vader in a way, I find that really interesting. And then also him being seduced by the dark side but still being seduced by the light. And I think that's a really interesting concept that I wish we got to see a little bit more of. But nevertheless, Kylo Ren, really cool character, probably the best character in the sequels. And yeah, I find him just really interesting. So, moving on.
The paint job's a little crude, but we think it gets the idea across. Glad to have you back, Commander.
Rex, thank you. But you don't have to call me Commander anymore.
Sure thing, Commander.
At number 9, we have Captain Rex. And Captain Rex is really cool character. I really like his design. I like his dual pistols a lot. For some reason, as a kid, I always, like, gravitated towards the characters that use dual pistols. I liked Cad Bane, I liked Rex, I liked Jango Fett, all just because they use dual pistols, and I thought that it was really cool. It was something different, I guess. But anyway, Rex is one of two very, very good characters that come out of I shouldn't say one of two, because there's a lot of amazing characters in Clone Wars, but two of my original, he's part of, like, my two favorite original characters that come from Clone Wars, and I'm sure you can guess the other one, but we'll get there. But Rex, his whole story is just kind of the culmination of, like, the clones arc overall. So, like, in the beginning, we see them used as soldiers for the Republic, just fighting their war. Obviously, Jedi, like, the Jedi couldn't take on an entire army by themselves, so they needed, like, their own army, and that's what the clones are there for. So, in the beginning, it's like, a lot of the clones are kind of just, like, we start to see, like, little personality traits here and there, and them trying to be different from one another, you know, distinguishing each other by, like, names or nicknames instead of, like, their code names. And we actually see, like, Rex, like, deal with, like, some of the people, or, like, some people that have different outlooks on the war and, like, the clones as a general. I think in season 1 or season 2, he gets injured in a fight, and he gets taken to this farm where a deserted clone, like, made a family there, and throughout the whole episode, he's like, oh, I'm gonna report you, you're a deserter. You're a deserter, like, this, that, and the other. And by the end of it, like, through talking with this guy, he was like, hey, I wanted to be something more than what I was made for, or what I was bred for, whatever. It's fine that you're still doing what you're doing, but I want to be something more. And by the end of it, Rex kind of understands and respects it. And throughout, like, the rest of Clone Wars, we see just the interactions with him and his brothers. We see, like, one of the big turning points is, like, Umbara, where Rex is under, I think his name is General Krell, dude that just, like, does not care about clones whatsoever, just sees them as a military, like, unit, just disposable, nothing better than droids. And we see, like, a lot of questions pop up of, well, what's going to happen to us after the war? You know, like, we were bred to fight this war, and without the war, like, we wouldn't be alive, so, like, we have to thank it for that. But what's truly going to happen to us afterwards? And, you know, we see, like, multiple different perspectives. A lot of the Jedi, like, treat the clones as, like, their own personal, like, people. They are their own people, while other people, like, I think Bo-Katan is one of the people that kind of, like, insults them and is like, oh, you might be, like, bred from a Mandalorian or whatever, but you're not, like, true warriors. You were just bred to fight a battle, whatever. And so, like, there's a lot of, like, disgust for the clones, and there's a lot of, like, differing opinions on them. And it's just all kind of culminates in the ending where, or ending of Clone Wars, I should say, where, you know, throughout the whole show, we hear them talking about, like, what's going to happen to us, what's going to happen to us. And we know that it's all for Order 66. And the episode with Fives, where his chip malfunctions and it leads down this dark rabbit hole of the inhibitor chips planted in the clones just for Order 66. And Fives' death is, like, takes a toll on Rex. You know, outside of just regularly seeing his brothers die on a basis for this war, like, seeing one of his brothers, like, in a panic like that, and, like, trying to his best to, like, communicate what's going on, and it takes a toll on him. And as he's, like, dying and Rex is holding Fives, he's like, oh, the nightmares are finally over. So that kind of implies that, like, the clones kind of subconsciously know about Order 66, or at least something, like, bad is going to happen that they're going to play a part in, and it just wears Rex down. Like, he just wants, he doesn't know what he truly, like, wants for himself outside of the war. He just wants, like, him and his brothers to be able to live, essentially, and to basically fight for what they believe in, you know. Even all the way in Rebels, we see Rex, like, pick back up the fight because he sees, like, that little spark again that kind of reminded him of what happened in the old days. Fighting for what's right, fighting against what they think is evil, and during that time the Empire is undoubtedly evil. So Rex is just a very good, like, mix of, like, he's kind of like the center point for, like, a lot of different, like, character interactions and, like, different plot threads and stuff, But he himself is just a really cool character because he's just doing what he was bred for and what he was essentially made for. But there's always that sense of kind of like mystery or concern of, well, what's going to happen next? And like, he just tries his best to be a good a soldier as he can. He's very loyal to Anakin, the Republic, all the Jedi. He has a great relationship with Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka. Like, he sees himself and all of his brothers as people. And rightfully so. Whether they were bred or cloned or whatever, like, they are still people. And so I just think that Rex is a really deep, really, like, interesting kind of, like, outlook as, like, soldiers during war. And especially even more because they were literally, like, bred and made to fight in said war. So I think Rex is a really cool character. He's obviously a badass. I love him cracking jokes with everybody as well, but it's just, or not even cracking jokes, but just being kind of like a smart ass. But yeah, I really enjoy Rex's character. I think that him and a lot of the clones are all like really good and fleshed out characters. I think that's one of Clone Wars' biggest strength, is just giving characters to all of these clones that we really didn't like get to know during the prequels. And I think Rex is the best example of that. So, number 9, Captain Rex.
Size matters not. Look at me. Judge me by my size, do you? And where you should not. For my ally is the Force. And a powerful ally it is. Life creates it. Makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter.
So at number 8, we have Master Yoda, and it feels kind of weird having him this low on the list because I really do like Yoda, but I just like the other characters a little bit and a bit more. So regardless, Yoda. I think what I like most about Yoda is his wisdom, his philosophy, when he's explaining the Force to Luke. It's, to him, he explains it as it's just energy. All living things create this energy, and people such as us, the Jedi, can use it. And like, he explains it in a way as like it's an extension of yourself. Do or do not, there is no try. Like, you judge me by my size. So all things just trying to teach Luke, like, that no matter what your size, no matter who you are, like, if you have the power to, like, help influence the Force, or if you're a Force sensitive, basically, like, this is how the Force kind of operates. And even if you're not Force sensitive, it doesn't truly matter, because, like, you still, like, have the Force to a certain degree. You give off the energy that we then use to, like, use the Force, essentially. The Force that you give off is what we're using, and it should always be used to protect and defend, never to attack. He also explains that the dark side is not stronger, but is the quicker and easier path. And, you know, if you let it, like, if you go that route, it will just consume you and destroy you. And so I think that is, like, why I like Yoda the most, just his wisdom on everything, even in situations that, like, because Yoda, like, we see a little bit in Clone Wars, Yoda is not, like, as stuck up as some of the other council members or just some of the other Jedi as a general. Like, he asks Anakin to, like, break him out when he's sick or whatever, or, like, is having, like, his weird visions. And so he understands that sometimes, like, the rules don't always apply. There are always, like, exceptions to the rules. And so you just kind of have to do what you feel is right and try to follow the will of the Force the best that you can. So I think Yoda just gets a little, like, he's still part of, like, at the end of the day, he still has to be involved in the politics of the Jedi and, like, having to deal with being the protectors of the Republic, and Sidious being there manipulating everything, like, also just kind of clouds his judgment. But Yoda always tries to give the best advice he can and his knowledge and wisdom to those who need it. He sits down with the clones in one episode of Clone Wars and explains to them that, oh, you all think that you're the same. You all think that, like, because you're cloned from the same person, you are all the same thing. But you're all different beings in your own way. You each give off, like, your own, like, energy, essentially. He explains that you're, like, still living life forms no matter what you may think. Like, just because you're clones doesn't mean you still don't, like, give off that same type of energy. And also, like, again, even if it's not the exact answer people are looking for, Yoda will always give his wisdom. You know, Anakin goes to Yoda to explain to him about the nightmares with Padme, and while he has to do it a roundabout way, Yoda's answer is still, like, it still applies to what Anakin is asking. He basically tells Anakin, like, yes, death is a scary thing. Yes, like, it's hard to lose someone that you care about. However, those people that you lose become part of the Force and they will always be with you. So don't mourn for them. Instead, embrace the death as a natural part of life and still remember that they are with you through the Force and they will speak to you through the Force. And while that's not the answer Anakin was looking for, it's still good advice of, you know, death is hard. It's a horrible thing to, like, have to go through. But you shouldn't mourn and let sadness and, like, all those negative emotions take hold of you. You should focus on the positive. In Last Jedi, Yoda has to come back and basically tell Luke, like, hey, you failed. We've all failed in our own ways. Failure is the greatest teacher. It's one of my favorite Yoda moments, is, like, yes, we all hate failing. Yes, we all, like, are scared of failing, and it sucks to fail. But it's the greatest teacher because you learn from your mistakes. And having to deal with that and come to terms with that is hard, but it's what you gotta do. So, I just like Yoda in all of his philosophy and his wisdom because he is very in tune with the Force. He is a very wise, creature. And so his just knowledge of over, like, 800, 900 years, like, he uses that to the best of his ability to train the next generation of Jedi to understand the Force and to basically pass off his wisdom the best he can. And I know that this is kind of like a contentious thing, but I know people don't like seeing Yoda flip around with a lightsaber and use the Force and do all of that craziness, but I enjoy watching it because you know, yes, he kind of is like the wizard that could like snap your finger and like blow you up. He kind of gives off that energy. But at the same time, like seeing that he's just a very skilled, very like elderly version of what we've been seeing throughout, like with the rest of the Jedi, like he's no different from the other Jedi in the way that he fights and the way that he uses the Force. He's just one of the best at it, if not the best in the Order. And so, yeah, that's why I like Yoda a lot. So, moving on.
Now, young Skywalker, you will die.
At number 7, we have Darth Sidious, the Senate himself. And Palpatine is just evil, manipulative, one dark motherfucker. No, honestly, Palpatine is just here because I like him for being evil for evil's sake. You know, I'll always appreciate a villain that I can kind of get behind their motive, or I can see their point of view. Palpatine is just, I'm evil. I'm going to do evil things. I'm going to make you hate me, but do it in a way that you like me. And he succeeds at that. Palpatine is one of the best manipulators, one of the best, like, evil seducers, like, out there in, like, Star Wars and in media, and just a really good villain as movies as a general. Like I said, he's a master manipulator. He has manipulated Dooku. He manipulated and turns Anakin. He almost fully seduces Luke. It takes him a minute, but Luke comes back to his senses. But for a second there, Palpatine almost had Luke as well. He's basically playing chess with himself during the Clone Wars. He's the leader of both of the armies, and he doesn't care what happens as long as at the end of it the Jedi die, or at some point. I don't know if it had to be the end necessarily, but as long as he wiped out all the Jedi, didn't matter. And he succeeds with, like, obviously he had to put like a big plan in place, but it's not like he really had to do anything else himself. He kind of got everybody else to do everything for him, and then all he had to say was execute Order 66, and boom, Jedi are dead. He seduces Anakin, he raids the temple, kills all the Jedi over there, and he's just sitting back in his Senate chair just watching the world burn and enjoying every second of it. And, you know, his power in the dark side is just unrivaled. Like, he is basically the dark side incarnate. Again, he has, like, so many different, like, he has so many different, like, powers, and, like, has so much wisdom in the dark side. Like, he's basically just Yoda for the dark side, and not a short little green man. But regardless, like, his knowledge in the dark side, like, him being able to help, like, seduce Anakin with a story of him and Plagueis attempting to find a way to, you know, live forever or cure people, essentially. Like, he knows what to say, how to say it, like, when to say it. He knows, like, he is just a master manipulator and will pretty much get anybody he wants to do what he wants. His skills with, again, the dark side are unmatched, but also his skill with a lightsaber. Dude got walked into 4 Jedi Masters walked into his room and were like, all right, you're under arrest. And he is like, oh, you think you're trapped in here, or you think that I'm trapped in here with you? No, you're trapped in here with me. And just within 10 seconds, like, slaughters 3 Jedi Masters, and then goes to kill Windu with the help of Anakin. But, like, that says something. Like, he literally just cut down 3 Jedi Masters like it's nothing. In Clone Wars, we see him, in one of the best duels in Clone Wars, we see him, like, toying with Savage and Maul, kills Savage without a second problem, and then basically tortures Maul into becoming his little guinea pig and working for him in the shadows. Like, this dude sees something he wants and he goes and takes it, and he will move his pieces on the board however he will to get his desired outcome. And so Palpatine is just evil for evil's sake, a master manipulator, a true menace of the dark side, and I love watching it every single time I see him. He's just very fun to watch, even though the things that he does are dark and really messed up. It's fun to watch Palpatine be Palpatine. So I just like watching Palpatine be Palpatine and just be the most evil that he can be. So, moving on.
You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
At number 6, we have Luke Skywalker, the child of hope, the last light of the rebellion, the hope of the galaxy, essentially. And Luke is a very, very balanced character. He has a lot of really good moments of him being like the best Jedi he can, and then moments where he doesn't, like, he shows great examples of what a Jedi shouldn't be and what a Jedi should kind of be over. And so I think, to start off, I think that without a doubt Luke is unquestionably loyal and compassionate to his friends, mostly loyal to his friends and the rebellion, but compassionate towards everybody and compassionate towards, like, those in need. And I think that compassion and that love is also a double-edged sword of, like, it causes him to make brash decisions, but we'll get to that. But Luke is just, when he gets there, his training with Yoda, we see him slowly learning how to accept the Force and use it, and, like, be able to, like, learn what a Jedi is and slowly learn about his heritage. You know, like, the first thing he wants to do is help people. He wants to join the rebellion and fight back against the Empire. And we see that while he wants to do all that, he has some issues. He rushes into things a lot. First sign that we see this is when they figure out who attacked the Jawas, and he was like, oh, the droids are going to be traced back to my home, I have to go back. Despite the fact of, if they are there, you might get shot. The fact that if they aren't there, they might have already killed your aunt and uncle. Like, you're just putting yourself in an unnecessary risk. But he needs to go see his family, and he sees that they're dead. And so that's the first kind of sign that we see. Another sign is, like, his training with Yoda. We see him abandon his training, essentially, because he gets a vision of his friends in trouble. And he thinks that he needs to go save them, despite the fact that it's all just a trap for them. And I'm pretty sure that if Luke just continued his training there on Dagobah, things still would have worked out without him being in Cloud City. I think that Lando, with Vader kind of waiting for Luke, if Vader had his like judgment misplaced or whatever, and Luke chose to stay with Obi-Wan and Yoda to train more, like Vader would still be sitting there. Boba Fett like would kind of be doing his thing with Solo, but I think Lando breaking them out, there might have been some more like complications with Vader not being preoccupied with Luke, but I think that they would have been able to get away. So we just see instances where Luke is just very brash. He lets his emotions take hold of him, and he's loyal to his friends at a fault. But he's also the Jedi that saved Darth Vader and uses his compassion to save him and be like, yeah, you might be Darth Vader, you might have like done all these horrible things, but you're still my father. And I still see the good in you, and I want to try and help you. And so, like, we see, like, Luke finally coming to terms with what he was told in Empire after losing his hand and stuff. And he's like, okay, well, you are my father, and I can kind of see, like, the light still left in you. Obi-Wan like told me what a great person you were. I want to see that great person, you know. And the minute, like, in the second Death Star, we see Palpatine like doing the same kind of thing that he did to Anakin to Luke, trying to seduce him, and he almost does, until, you know, he's fighting Vader. He chops off his mechanical hand, and he was like, oh, I'm becoming my father. And so he throws away his lightsaber, and he's like, I am a Jedi like my father before me. I am not going to give in to the dark side, and I'm not going to be seduced by you. And so I think that Luke is just a really good example of like a compassionate hero, really good, like, light and hope of the galaxy, essentially. And we really can't talk about Luke without bringing in Last Jedi, and I will try to keep this as brief as possible, but I'm always on the fence with how I feel, because I see both sides. I can see why people get upset that, you know, the person that brought back Darth Vader, the person that saw light in Vader, was going to kill his nephew because of visions. You know, how can this be the same person where everybody was telling him, don't do it, you can't do it, you can't turn him back, but he does, but then turn around and say, oh yeah, this person also was going to attack his nephew because of what he was going to become, because of some dark visions. But I also like think and kind of lean towards the side of, well, Luke isn't perfect. He's flawed. That's the entire like point of his story in Last Jedi. Would have been really easy to make it to where he was like this grandmaster Jedi that had could do all these things, and he taught Rey this, that, and the other thing, and then they go to fight the First Order. Would have been easy to do that, but I think it's a lot more interesting and a lot more like challenging to the audience to be like, okay, well, this is what you thought you were gonna get, but here's something different. Let's do like an introspective on his character. Luke becomes a legend after saving Darth Vader, killing the Emperor, and blowing up the second Death Star. I know that he didn't kill the Emperor or blow up the second Death Star, but he's part of like that whole thing. So he kind of gets like, he gets a little bit of an ego, kind of, and he's like, oh, I'm Luke Skywalker, I can do this, that, and the other thing. And so I think the biggest part of this, of like him being in or out of character, comes down to the one line that he says in the movie, and that's, it was a fleeting thought. Luke says that for a split second I was going to attack Ben, and that's because his fear took over. And fear will make you do things. Fear will make you go against your better judgment or do things like that aren't normally in your character. I mean, look at Anakin. Anakin literally turns to the dark side because of fear of losing Padme. So it's that same kind of deal where it's like we can think these characters are like flawless and like they can be flawless and like the shining shimmer of hope, but even the brightest light like will dim at times. And so Luke lost his hope. Luke let his fear take over, and that was kind of the deciding factor of it. And so another thing to point out is it's always like said that those who try to avoid their destiny end up causing, like, leading down that road. And so he goes to try and stop Ben from turning to the dark side. He ends up causing it because of a simple mistake, because for a split second, it's kind of like an inverse of what happens in the throne room on the second Death Star. There, he's giving into his anger and is about ready to kill Vader. He sees he chops off his mechanical hand. He sees it. He's like, oh, I'm becoming my father. In this sense, there's nothing to snap him into that kind of realization. It was just that there was, but it came too late. The moment that he ignited his lightsaber, that's when that realization of, I'm going to kill my nephew. I'm about to kill my best friend and my sister's kid. What am I doing? And unfortunately, Ben wakes up and the rest is kind of history. But Luke finds his hope again at the end of the movie after talking with Yoda and realizing that just because he failed does not mean that he is a failure. He has to learn from his failure. And so he uses his force projection thing to buy the Resistance enough time to escape, and also confront Kylo and be like, hey, I'm sorry for what happened. It doesn't mean a whole lot. I can't take back what I did, but I am sorry. And he, for the rest of that fight, I think that is one of the coolest fights that we've seen, because it's a weird fight where it's just Kylo constantly attacking and Luke doing his best to avoid all of his attacks to basically kind of show off and get him angry, but also to keep up the force projection, because the minute that they found out he would find out that it's not really him, he would just go and attack the Resistance. So I don't know. Let me know if you guys would like me to, or would like to hear me talk more about The Last Jedi, my thoughts on Luke, and just kind of my thoughts on that movie as a whole. I know that it's a very touchy subject in the Star Wars community, but I have my own gripes with it as well. Don't get me wrong, it's not like I absolutely love the movie, but I think it offers more good than it does bad. So let me know if you guys would like to see a Last Jedi video, or just a deeper dive into Luke's kind of character, or at least my opinion on more of Luke's character, a lot more than what I can do here. But overall, I really love Luke Skywalker. I really love both aspects that we see of him, from Moisture Farm Boy to Jedi Knight to Broken Legend to Jedi Master. Luke is just a very, inspiring character, a very, hopeful character, and yeah, that is why I like Luke Skywalker. At number 5, we have Obi-Wan Kenobi. And Obi-Wan is just a lot of fun to watch and just to see, no matter what point of the timeline, who's playing him, what he's doing. Obi-Wan is just fun to watch. His witty banter with Anakin is always amazing. Him having kind of this suave, kind of smart-assy attitude towards his villains. He kind of cracks jokes towards Grievous or Dooku, and just he's a fun character to watch, but he also has a pretty good amount of depth to him as well. Obi-Wan is kind of the perfect example of the Jedi at the time. He's not so much arrogant in his own abilities, but he doesn't kind of share the arrogance, but more of these are kind of the Jedi. This is the Jedi code. We should stick to the code as much as possible. We shouldn't try to go outside of what the council is doing too much. I mean, and it's funny that he turns out that way because of who his master is, and I would assume Qui-Gon would try to bring him up kind of to have a similar outlook to himself, but regardless, Obi-Wan is just very by the books. Even having Anakin as a Padawan loosened him up a lot and kind of makes him slide let the rules slide a little bit and not always go with the code. But he is a very by the books Jedi, one of the wisest, one of the strongest. Obi-Wan is just a really good example of the Jedi at the time. And so taking on Anakin as an apprentice, there is kind of that the relationship starts out rocky because Obi-Wan really doesn't not trust, but he doesn't really believe in what Qui-Gon says about him in the beginning. It's only on Qui-Gon's dying breath that Obi-Wan's okay, you believe so much that this kid is the chosen one, I will take up and train this boy no matter what. That's when he starts to believe. And then we see Obi-Wan's kind of stricter methods, more by the books training methods kind of clash with Anakin, this emotional teenager who just kind of got wrapped up into all of this. And so their relationship starts off really, really rocky. They're still friends, and they still are building that brotherly bond, but I don't think a lot of that happens until Clone Wars. I don't think that it's both, or I don't think it's until they're both kind of I don't think it's until Anakin becomes a knight and is no longer viewed as kind of Obi-Wan's Padawan that they start forming more of a brotherly bond. That bond was always kind of there, but you could sense a lot more tension in it. Obi-Wan really didn't want to train Anakin, but he ended up doing it. And because of the way Obi-Wan is, it very much clashes with Anakin and his whole entire emotional state. But we see them grow a bond. We see them become brothers throughout the Clone Wars. And Obi-Wan more than likely knows about Padme and their whole relationship, but he keeps it secret because he wants Anakin to be happy. And that's kind of like the start of him like loosening up, essentially. We also see that in Clone Wars that Obi-Wan also had a lot of interest himself. The Duchess Satine, the ruler of Mandalore at the time, they had a thing, but Obi-Wan stayed with the Order, and Satine had things like had to rule over Mandalore. But their bond and their connection was so deep that Obi-Wan says, if you would have said the word, I would have left for you. And that just shows how deeply like in love he was with her. So it's not like Obi-Wan doesn't understand these feelings. He just, I wouldn't say he's better for it, but he learned to kind of distance himself and remove himself from those emotions. And so we also see with the return of Maul, like Obi-Wan's kind of only like step into the dark side, because we see Maul taunting him. We see him do lots of horrible things to goad Obi-Wan. And we see, like, at the mention of what he did to Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan lashes out at Maul. And, like, that's kind of, like, our only time that we've ever seen Obi-Wan, like, delve kind of into the dark side. So, Obi-Wan has his, like, imperfections, too. Like, he's not all perfect. But I think those imperfections, like, shine a lot more and stand out a whole lot more because of like how much of a by the books Jedi he is. It's like, oh, Obi-Wan's doing that? Like, that's weird. The ending of episode 3 always kills me because we see like Anakin and Obi-Wan's like last like talk, essentially, and like their last altercation together, essentially. I can think of a word, but basically it's their last time meeting until Kenobi, but I'd argue that's Vader and not Anakin, and that's a whole nother discussion that we'll get to. But Obi-Wan, like, he cares for Anakin. He loves Anakin. He didn't want, like, to fight Anakin. He didn't want to, like, believe that Anakin did all these horrible things. But we see that, like, we see how much he struggles with it. We see just how kind of, like, broken Obi-Wan has become after everything that he went through. And it's still amazing that when Luke comes around, he's like, he takes him in and he tries again. He tries a little bit to be a little bit better of a mentor towards Luke than he was Anakin, and kind of like acknowledging his feelings and trying to like help him through them instead of just being like, ignore them. But like, Obi-Wan is just a very good like example of what a Jedi is, at least like for the most part. He has his little, like, I wouldn't call them issues, but he has his little flaws of most of the Jedi at the time, like distancing themselves from their emotions and not trying to form attachments and stuff like that. But still, he is a very good mentor to Anakin and Luke, and he is an astounding lightsaber duelist, taking on Grievous, Dooku, Maul. Like, he's the first Jedi to kill a Sith in 1,000 years when he kills Maul. I say kill in quotations, but we'll get there. But yeah, Obi-Wan, just a really fun character to watch. A character that has so many different connections to other characters, and them all kind of like interweaving makes him a lot more deep and complex, and makes those other characters deep and complex. And that's why I like Obi-Wan a lot. So, that's Obi.
I am lost. And yet, I can feel his presence. So close, so close. I can see him in my mind's eye. Kenobi. Kenobi!
At number 4, we've got Darth Maul.
Formerly Darth, now just Maul.
And Darth Maul is such a sad and broken character. Like, it's crazy that they took this dude with literally no character or any personality from the Phantom Menace and just made him one of the most, like, deep characters, one of the most broken characters. He is there to cause chaos and pain for one person and one person only: Obi-Wan. He wants Obi-Wan dead so badly, but not even just dead. Like, he wants Obi-Wan to experience the pain and the hell that Maul went through for all those years after Naboo. His sole purpose in life is to make Obi-Wan suffer as much as possible and then finally kill him. But it's just his driving force throughout Clone Wars and through Rebels. But beyond that, Maul is a very, like, powerful character in his own right. Like, after, I say waking up, is essentially, after being revived, let's say it like that. After being revived, like, he takes control of multiple gangs. He rises to power. He goes after Mandalore and becomes the leader of Mandalore for a while until the siege happens. But he is not to be underestimated just because of, like, him not being associated with the Sith anymore. He is still a force to be reckoned with, and one of my favorite examples is him getting his own Vader hallway scene at the end of Clone Wars, where he's just tearing through clones with nothing but the Force, just decapitating people with paneling off the ship. It's really dope. But back to his character, like, he will do anything and everything just to make Obi-Wan suffer. As I was talking about before, he, like, taunts Obi-Wan, and he was like, "Oh, I gutted your master. Like, how does that make you feel?" And he gets some anger out of Obi-Wan, and he was like, "Oh, that's not part of the Jedi way. Being angry isn't what you guys do. That's our thing. What's going on there?" And so he just slowly picks away at Obi-Wan. Next thing he does is he kills, like, his only love. He kills Satine just to, like, make him feel even more pain, more hell, more anguish. Like, he wants to torture this man until, like, he begs for death. And, you know, despite all of his best attempts, Obi-Wan still stands firm as, like, a Jedi, but it still just, like, slowly chips away and, like, beats him down, essentially, like, physically and emotionally and mentally. And then we get, as I talked about before, Maul, like, finding Sidious again. And Sidious is like, "Well, I've moved on, so you're not my apprentice anymore. But because of all this power that you've obtained taking over Mandalore and stuff like that, I'm still going to use you." And so he tortures him and uses him as, like, a little puppet, essentially. I'm pretty sure, like, no, because Maul says that he orchestrated, like, trying to lure Anakin and Obi-Wan over, but still, the point is that he was pretty much just used as a tool by Sidious, almost like everybody, But even just, he was like, oh, you're alive again. Cool, I'm going to use you because of all this power that you've gotten. And so it gets to a point where he starts to go crazy. We see in the Siege of Mandalore, like, how deathly afraid he is for Sidious's takeover. He is one of the very few that understands the gigantic shift that's about to happen and how much shit is about to go down in the galaxy. And it terrifies him because he doesn't know where he stands in all of this. At one, like, flick of the wrist, Sidious could kill him too. But he stands tall with his, like, little empire that he built, and Maul eventually escapes and kind of lays low until he finally, like, gets a lead on where Obi-Wan is. And just like before, his driving force in all of this is just Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan. I'm going to make you suffer. I'm going to make you beg for mercy. I'm going to make you experience every bit of hell that I experienced. And he finally finds Obi-Wan, and he's sitting on Tatooine just wasting away. And he's confused. He was like, why are you here? Why, like, what are you here for? Like, obviously to hide, but there's something else to it. It's like, oh, you're protecting something. No, someone. You're protecting someone. And he's basically goading Obi-Wan and giving him no choice but to fight him, because that's how desperately bad he wants Obi-Wan to fight him. And side note, the scream of him shouting Kenobi, just wandering through the desert, losing his mind, is fantastic and gives me chills every single time. The voice actor for Maul is incredible. But, like, we see with their, I call it a fight, but it's literally like 10 seconds long. That fight is more talking than it is actual fight. But we see Maul, like, he can never let go of his hatred. He can never let go of his vendetta against Obi-Wan. If he just would have let it go, who knows? But it was the one thing driving him for so many years. It's the one thing he could never let go. And so it eventually is the death of him. And even in death, he was like, he asks, oh, are you protecting the Chosen One? And Obi-Wan says yes. And he was like, oh, well, he will avenge us. And so even in death, he's still kind of holding on to his, like, hatred and, like, his anger of everything that's happened, because the way I take it, at least, is Maul saying, oh, if he's the Chosen One, he's going to be the one to take down the Empire, and he'll be the one to, like, get back at everything that they did to us. And so he can just never let go, and that's Maul's biggest flaw. But excuse me. But yeah, that's why I really like Darth Maul. Just a very broken character. He just wants to watch the world burn and be the cause of all the flames, especially if it includes Obi-Wan. So, moving on to the top 3. At number 3, the bronze medal, we have Darth Vader. And Darth Vader is, again, a broken, sad, tragic character, but he also has that menace and that power and just that overall sense of terror. You know, you hear that breathing, you run. Like, that breathing is so, like, distinguishable, like, you realize, like, you're screwed. But just the fear that Vader imposes on people, like, the power that he controls, even in his own, like, even within the Empire, like, he has no problem just taking care of people that disobey him or don't fit up to his, like, standard or whatever. He will choke people out, like, no matter, like, at a moment's notice, just because of a bad day, essentially. But it goes a lot deeper than that, because obviously you can't talk about Vader without Anakin, and we will talk about Anakin, but they are very much two different personalities. Same person, two completely different personalities. While Anakin is the hero, Vader is the absolute villain. He is everything that Anakin would fight against and fight. Vader is everything that Anakin would despise, but that's who he becomes. And we'll get to Anakin, but this is about Vader. But Vader's just pain and what's happened to his life, and yeah, he commands this great army. He's a Sith Lord with all this power, but he's a broken man. He can't function on his own without his suit, and even with his suit, could you even call that living, really? Because his suit just kind of takes over everything for him. It's, I'd imagine, very uncomfortable and painful, and having to deal with everything in the suit to keep you alive, basically. You're basically just a torso with mechanical limbs. But emotionally, everything that's happened, and just his overall place, because he can't even attempt to attack Sidious to even become Emperor, because Palpatine made the suit. And even if he didn't, in Vader's state, he's powerless at the Emperor. But so he just kind of grows complacent, and he lets his anger for Obi-Wan and the Jedi kind of fester, and then just kind of goes out and takes his anger out on whoever he feels deserves it. For the longest time, his biggest job was just hunting down Jedi. So it's very hard to talk about Vader without also talking about Anakin, because the events, Anakin's kind of last moments lead up to who Vader is and who he kind of becomes, but it's more so the fact of Vader has kind of made this life what it is now because of what happened, and now he kind of has to sit and wallow in his depressive state. He kind of has to just make the best of what is right now. He literally threw away his old life for what he has now. So he just kind of takes advantage of that, and just not take advantage, because I don't think he truly enjoys it, but he just becomes this dark lord and this menace to the galaxy, to where, if you have Vader hunting you, you're dead already. He is this feared, imposing force in the galaxy, but underneath, he's just a fragile, frail, barely functioning human. And we see him basically fully reject his other side of who he used to be. And even with talking with Luke, he was like, I can still see the good in you. And he's like, Vader says it's too late for me. I've been in this state, I've been within the dark side for so long that I am no longer Anakin Skywalker. I am Darth Vader. I am what you see. And it's sad to see Anakin become this way. But with all of that being said, he is still a force to be reckoned with because of everything that happened. He takes no shit. He will basically kill whoever he wants on a whim. And just, I mean, you want to talk about, like, how, like, scary Vader can be. Two of my favorite scenes that, like, I think perfectly depict Vader are the Vader hallway scene at Rogue One, and then the scene in Kenobi where he's walking down the street and he's just throwing people around with the Force and snapping their necks just to get at Obi-Wan and to try and draw him out. Like, that is as ruthless as you can be, like, without getting too, like, super violent for what Star Wars is kind of rated. But, you know, Vader is kind of like the imposing force in the galaxy for the longest time. Everybody, like, has a sense of who he is, and if you have him on you, you're dead. But it's also, it's crazy to think that a man that's feared that much is just kind of a brittle torso within a mechanical body. And so Darth Vader, one of the most tragic characters, one of the most frightening villains, and just an overall just fantastic character. I love watching Vader on screen, whether it's him becoming more emotional or slowly in episode 6, or just the presence that he imposes all the other times. And so that is why I like Darth Vader and why he sits at number 3.
I was beginning to believe I knew who you were behind that mask, but it's impossible. My master could never be as vile as you.
Anakin Skywalker was weak. I destroyed him.
Then I will avenge his death.
Revenge is not the Jedi way.
Taking home the silver medal at number 2, we have Ahsoka Tano. And it was actually kind of like up in the air who I liked more between her and my number 1. And we'll get to him. But Ahsoka is just a fantastically written character. Her and Rex are like fantastic additions to Star Wars from Clone Wars, 2 of the best original characters from Clone Wars. She is a fantastic, like, depiction of how, like, a Padawan growing up in kind of the state that a lot of the Padawans were growing up during the Clone Wars, like, can have an effect on, like. And a lot of that also has to do with her master being Anakin. But, like, she kind of sees through all the BS of the Council and the other Jedi. Like, especially during when she gets, like, framed for blowing up the bomb in the temple. Like, they all just kind of say, oh, well, there's a bunch of evidence against you. And even though we're all part of, like, the same, like, group and you're one of us, you know, the evidence stacks against you and we're not going to try and take your side in any way. It's just gonna, we're just gonna do this formality of a trial, and the decision to, like, shoo you away has already been made. And so when she proves herself innocent, they turn around and they're like, oh, well, we just misunderstood everything that was happening. Like, this was the Force's way of showing, like, you growing as a Jedi and becoming, like, wiser. And, you know, this was your grand trial out of, like, Padawan or whatever, and to make you better. And she calls them out on it, and she was like, no, like, if you guys, you guys didn't have my back before, and now that everything's okay, like, you want to welcome me back? No. And as much as it pains her to leave the Order because of Anakin and everybody else there, like Plo Koon and everybody else she has a connection with, she has to walk her own path. She finds that she can't stay with the Jedi because of what happened. She can't completely, like, put their faith in them anymore until, like, Bo-Katan comes in and asks for her help, and she has to ask for Anakin and Obi-Wan's help. And again, there we see her seeing through all of the political BS, and when Coruscant gets attacked and they have to go and not follow and not help out Ahsoka, she was like, oh, I see that, like, you guys are playing politics as usual. And Obi-Wan says, like, oh, the people of Coruscant need us. And she was like, no, the Chancellor needs you, because it's what it is. It's the fact that Palpatine's been captured and you guys have to go save him instead of coming to help me. Now, that's a sticky situation because it quite literally is the Chancellor. But the point is that instead of helping out these people that, you know, you're sworn to kind of protect, we're meant to be peacekeepers, we were meant to be like guardians of peace, you're going out and you're protecting the Chancellor. So she just has, because of everything that's happened, she has a very different outlook on the Jedi and the Jedi Code as a general. Her being Anakin's apprentice also kind of helps with that, because he was dealing with his own stuff and disobeying the council, but also trying to, like, in a way, hold up those values to a certain degree, because he has to be, like, her example. But he shows her that it's okay to kind of cut loose. It's okay to kind of, like, go against the code in certain areas here and there. It's crazy to think that, like, in the beginning of Clone Wars, she was just kind of the sidekick, right? She was just kind of there. She kind of follows Obi-Wan. She follows Anakin. She helps out Rex kind of here and there. And she was never, like, she was always kind of seen as the sidekick. But then we have episodes and moments that make her grow as a character and kind of, like, warm her up to us. Like, there's a whole episode of how she has to lead a bomber run in a space battle. And, you know, she tries one attempt and a lot of them die, but they try another attempt and she grows as a person, listening to orders, calling, like, Ball also, like, going with her gut instead of being so indecisive and trying, like, being so scatterbrained. And we have a lot of moments and episodes that just kind of warm her up to us, show her more of, like, who she is outside of battle, and just, like, really developing her character. She is, I would call her the main character of Clone Wars. And one of the reasons I say that is because it ends with her, and it begins with her arriving to Anakin, and it ends with her leaving the Republic, or, I mean, what's left of it at that point, but you get my point. It's her show. While it's meant to be like this big outlook on the Clone Wars as a whole, you can tell that the Ahsoka episodes are very focused, kind of telling their own story within a grander story, and just developing her as a character for later. And in Rebels, we see her kind of, like, fully grow into her role. Like, as one of the last Jedi left, she has to try and teach whoever's left out there, you know, the best way to follow the Force and the best way to survive. And grow and still kind of be peacekeepers. Because that's another big thing, is that she says this a lot herself. We're meant to be peacekeepers, but throughout her whole time in the Order, she's been nothing but a soldier. And for a Padawan to grow up in a situation like that, it's conflicting and kind of messed up if you think about it. Because we're meant to be peacekeepers. We're not supposed to be like throwing our lives out on the battlefield like this. We're supposed to be helping people and defending the peace, but we're in a war. And so I think that just kind of gives her like different outlooks compared to other Jedi, and also just all the stuff that she's kind of gone through as a whole has kind of like shaped her. Her fight with I almost said Anakin. Her fight with Vader and Rebels is so like emotionally like tearing. Like, you can see how much Anakin and what happened in the Clone Wars like haunts her in Rebels. She has, when she sees like old clips of Anakin like training and stuff, like you can always tell she has like, man, I wish I could go back. I wish things like went differently. And it's sad because she truly like admired Anakin, and she like looked up to him. And one line that she says in Mandalorian just tears, like rips my heart apart. She was like, oh, I've seen what emotions can do to a fully trained Jedi Knight, one of the best of us. And it's like that line hits home because when she finds out everything that happens with Anakin and becoming Vader and stuff, like, I can't imagine how her first reaction to that. We kind of see her first reaction to like seeing Vader, and she kind of like passes out, but like she must have gone for years and years thinking that Anakin was dead, and then figuring out what him becoming Vader, like it tears at her. And yeah, Ahsoka is just really, she's what the Jedi during the prequel era should have been. Her time in Rebels and her tail end at kind of the end of Clone Wars, like we see during the siege, like on Mandalore, like or technically it's farther than that, during the ending episodes, like the last episode or two of Clone Wars, we see her try to protect as many people as possible. Even if the clones are trying to kill her and Rex, it's not by their own doing. She's not going to kill all of those friends that she made, all those people that she respects, because they're not in control. This isn't of their free will. And she's trying to protect as much life as possible, but in the end, they all die. And at that point, she wants to honor their memory of who they were and before the chip, and all the soldiers to that point. I think the ending of Clone Wars is basically perfect, but beside the point, Ahsoka is just an amazing Jedi, what most Jedi should try to like be: protectors of the peace, guardians of light, just taking a neutral stance as much as possible and just trying to be helpful where they can in the greater galaxy. And it was amazing to see her grow from little Padawan to Jedi Master, and I can't wait to see what they do with her in the Ahsoka show. I'm very excited for that. But that is Ahsoka Tano.
We'll let them go.
And last, but certainly not least, the gold medal, number 1, Anakin Skywalker. If you couldn't tell, I have a thing for tragic characters. I like seeing people being brought up and then torn completely down and how they react and deal with it. Don't ask me why, but Anakin is one of the most tragic characters, and like I said in the Vader section, it's hard to talk about one without the other. It's a little easier to talk about Anakin without Vader, but Vader is still very much a part of Anakin, as much as he would like to deny it. Or I guess it would technically be vice versa by that point. But either way, Anakin, the chosen one, the one who is just kind of like found and thrown into all of this shit. Like, he was just a slave boy growing up on Tatooine, and Qui-Gon shows up and frees him. And he's heard stories of the Jedi and how they can pretty much do anything in his eyes, or at least that's kind of his expectation. But then he kind of realizes that, oh, well, you're going to free my mom too, right? And he's like, no, I can only free you. So already his view is kind of like, oh, well, I thought that you would be able to save my mom too. And then he gets to the temple and he's getting kind of like drilled by all the masters in the council, and he's this 9-year-old boy that got taken away from a horrible situation. And while granted, his life as a Jedi is probably leagues and leagues better than him being a slave, it's still kind of an awkward situation. Like, he's still kind of in a cage. The Jedi teach him to detach yourself from your emotions and your attachments as a whole. But the only thing that was truly keeping him going was the love for his mom. He was happy with his mom. And so, like, a lot, we hear, like, oh, you're thinking about your mother. You're worried about your mom. In episode 2, he has nightmares of her dying and seeing her death and stuff. And so Yoda pretty much says his whole path right then and there. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. Fear of losing his mother and Padme makes him get angry, and then he suffers for the rest of his life as Vader until he turns again. I skipped over hate, but you get my point. Like, Yoda in that one sentence just completely lays out Anakin's path throughout the prequels on how this boy that had nothing but his emotions and his attachments was then thrown into a society, essentially, where they told you can't do any of that. This is what you should be. And on top of that, then getting another emotion of love towards Padme and getting a connection with her and having to try and suppress that new emotion now. Like, it's very taxing on Anakin. And then in episode 2, we see him fully break down. Well, before any of that, we see that, like, his connection with Obi-Wan is kind of wishy-washy. Like, sometimes they like each other, but in other ways, he's very envious, very jealous, very, angry at Obi-Wan for the way that their relationship kind of is. He doesn't understand this, that, and the other. And then hit the visions of his mother, and so he goes to Tatooine. he tells Padme, he's like, look, I'm still protecting you and stuff, but I need to go see my mom. And he finds her, and she dies. He finds her on her last couple minutes of life, and has her die in his arms, and it breaks him. He just doesn't know how to deal with it, all of this anger and pent-up emotions over what's been happening with Obi-Wan, with Padme. Now his mom's died. He fucking snaps, and he kills all of the Sand People. Completely just eradicated them. Just didn't matter who it was. Men, women, children. Murdered. And so that there kind of foreshadows what happens with him and the Jedi. In episode 3, like, his connection with Obi-Wan has gotten a whole lot better. We see throughout Clone Wars him growing his friendship with Rex, growing his friendship with Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, other Jedi, like, but he still always kind of has to, like, suppress his emotions and still has to try and detach himself, and he doesn't know how to do that, on top of living a secret life with Padme, who we find out is pregnant. And he's happy, they're both happy, but they're both like, shit, this is going to cause a lot of issues, because then he has to worry about, okay, well, they're my kids. If the Jedi find out, they might, like, excommunicate me, but what if they try to take in my kids? Well, kid at that point, but what if they try to take in my kid, because he'll probably be force sensitive. And so all throughout episode 3, we see Anakin battling with his emotions and battling, like, what should I do? What should I do? The same thing, I'm getting nightmares of Padme now, the same way that I did with my mom, and he doesn't know how to deal with it. And so, like I said before with Luke, those who try to end up stopping the future end up causing it. So throughout, he finally, like, snaps again, essentially. He's told countless times that he has to follow the code and he has to abide by the Jedi rules, but now he's being told to spy on the Chancellor, who he considers a great friend. I didn't talk about this much in Palpatine, but Palpatine was one of the only people that Anakin could be, like, truthful with. I'd say him and Padme were the only two that he could be, like, 100% honest and truthful with. Hide nothing. And so Sidious, like, not goads him, but he slowly, like, seduces him, and slowly, oh, it's okay, Anakin, like, things will work out, like, you will be a great Jedi, but just slowly trying to, like, implant these seeds of doubt and try and, like, oh, well, the council said this, but it's okay that you feel this way. Like, Palpatine just really just preys on Anakin's, like, whole situation and all of the emotions that he doesn't know how to deal with. And he uses it against him in his seduction, basically. And so we see, like, countless times other Jedi kind of, like, doing their own thing. Anakin also, like, can't freely talk about what's going on. He goes to Yoda and, like, he's like, I'm scared to lose my wife. He can't say that, but he's like, I'm scared to lose a person dear to me. And again, while Yoda gives his great wisdom, it doesn't help Anakin, because he can't say, like, what's already happened. He can't be like, hey, I've already had visions of my mom. She died. Now I'm having visions of my wife. I'm scared she's going to die. And so they go to confront Palpatine, and he's just sitting there contemplating like what's going to happen if Palpatine is the only lead and the only way for Padme to live. What should I do? And so he goes to the arrest, basically, to see, because he's still conflicted and he doesn't know truly who he is or who to follow or whatever. You know, if Palpatine is this horrible Sith Lord, he's caused a lot of problems, but if he's the only way that I can save Padme, then, like, I don't know. So he gets there, and Windu is about ready to kill him, and it's like, he's too dangerous to be left alive. Like, he needs to go. And so Anakin is like, well, he has to stand trial. The same thing that he tried to say to Palpatine for Dooku earlier. And we kind of see, like, that kind of stuff in Clone Wars too, where the Jedi, like, are supposed to not outright kill people and supposed to hold people for trial. But Windu is like, no, we gotta do this. We gotta kill this guy. So another Jedi is breaking another rule that is suppressing him. Not the rules as a whole are suppressing him, and a high member of the council is just blatantly just ignoring it, and it kind of forces him to, like, make his decision of, okay, well, if you're going to get rid of my only way to possibly save my wife, I'm going against you. And the minute he does it, and the minute Mace dies, like, he breaks down and he has his second snap moment, and it's like, oh no, I fully committed to this. And so he becomes Vader, and he tears down and destroys his old life. And his fight with Obi-Wan is gut-wrenching, and it's horrible to watch these two brothers go at each other. Just, it's sad. It's very sad. That fight, the ending of that fight always gets me, but Anakin just fully breaks under the pressure. Not under the pressure, but, like, after so many years of not being able to, of being told this is what you should do, this is what you can't do, this is, like, how we operate here, and then for everything to just come crashing down on him emotionally, and him not knowing what to do about Padme, and the Jedi aren't helping, like, his case at all. It's just, he weighs his options, and he goes for what is going to save and protect his family, because at the end of the day, he cares about his wife and his family. He cares about Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, and the rest of the Jedi too. But it's his family, and his, basically, like, his true, like, connection, because because his relationship with Padme is really the only way that he's been able to get out all of his emotions. And so he loses to Obi-Wan, becomes Vader, and fully becomes a Vader. And he's just meant to suffer there for the rest of his life because of what he did. And he has to accept what he did and wallow in that pain, suffering, and anger of just everything. He did this to himself, and he probably regrets it, but this is where he's at now. And so he wallows in his anger and hatred, and he becomes a frightening force in the galaxy until his son comes back and shows him, hey, this is who you were. You can still be that person. You made a bunch of horrible decisions and mistakes, but you're still my father. And so we see Palpatine torturing Luke, and Anakin finally comes back out, he was like, no, I'm going to save this last bit of my family that I have. I've been suffering for so many years, and this is like my one chance to like kind of redeem myself for everything that I've done, is by saving the son that I thought I lost years and years ago, and the only family that I truly have left. And yeah, Anakin and Vader are just really, really great, like two sides of the same whole. Like, Anakin is the hero, Vader is the ultimate villain. We see Anakin fulfill the prophecy, just not in a way that everybody expected it to, so he still is the chosen one. And just seeing Anakin like develop as a person, even when he goes down his darker road, like seeing his connections and his banter with Obi-Wan, Padme, Ahsoka, Rex, other Jedi. Like, Anakin just wanted to be a hero. Anakin just wanted to live his life the way that he wanted to. He grew up as a slave, and while not a slave not a traditional slave as a Jedi, he was kind of a slave to the code and a slave to the order. He tells Ahsoka, like, I understand wanting to walk away from the order. Like, he contemplates it himself, because it's just another cage. It's just another, like, form of slavery to him. But yeah, Anakin Skywalker, my favorite Star Wars character. He is just a fantastic written character, and a very tragic way to show like what can happen if you can't like fully express yourself, if you don't healthfully like put out your emotions. Like, Anakin's story is just, it's a very like well written, like, cautionary tale, is kind of the way that I see it. That is my top 10 favorite Star Wars characters. Of course, let me know what your top 10 favorites are in the comments below. Which ones do you agree with on my list? Which ones don't you? What do you guys have to say about just everything that I talked about today? I want to hear your thoughts and get a discussion going. And remember, these are just all my opinions, so please be civil in the comments. Like, just because I have somebody over. Truthfully, the ranking of characters don't really matter all that much, except for probably the top 3. I love all these characters. I love Star Wars as a whole. Like, I just love talking about the things that I enjoy and giving my opinions on stuff. So let me hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. And with that, thank you so much for watching. I'm sure that this video is a whole lot longer than I expected it to be, so if you sat through it all, I very much appreciate it. Leave a like and again a comment if you enjoyed. Make sure you hit the notification bell and subscribe for more kind of discussion videos like this, and just getting my thoughts out there and hearing your guys' thoughts as well. So remember to be kind to yourselves and each other, and have a great day overall. And I will talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.